Chris, have you seen and heard Lily Allen emoting about the Labour manifesto?
I haven't, no.
Look at this.
Guys, I just watched the Labour manifesto and I think it's the best manifesto I've ever seen.
Now, she may actually be very emotional, but the tears are not real.
What? So is this another one of these online jiggery pokery moments?
Also known as a filter on TikTok.
Oh, right.
Which means you can do your own.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I think we know what this means.
I just think this is going to be the best episode of Brexitcast we've ever done.
Brexitcast from the BBC.
No one's got a clue what Brexit is.
Brexit is...
I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this. We're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing.
I met Boris Johnson once.
The doubters, the doomsters, the gloomsters, they are going to get it wrong again.
Remainers and leavers, that's going to end well.
A process which I can only describe as a dog's Brexit.
It's Adam at Westminster.
And it's Chris at Westminster with the beginnings of a burgeoning binder of manifestos, Labour and the Lib Dems. I didn't want to ask the Greens for a printout, so I'm sticking with the old PDF of them.
Well, you can keep your burgeoning binder. This is Katya Adler in Brussels with a bit more alliteration on a very frosty evening.
And it's Laura in a car park, obviously in Birmingham, where I've been at the Labour manifesto launch. So here it is. And it's quite cold, but I've got some malt loaf and a new pair of gloves and a scarf, so I'm fine.
Oh, lovely gloves.
Oh, yeah, they are.
You like them?
Very necessary at this time of year.
Lovely, lovely.
So that's good. Yeah, exactly. Lovely.
Do Labour think their manifesto is glovely and full of glovely stuff?
Yeah, I mean, look, this Labour manifesto is full of absolutely enormous, ginormous, really expensive promises and big tax increases for the wealthy and for business. And it's huge. And because it's huge, there's already lots of scepticism about whether or not it's really realistic. But it's massive. And the funny thing is that today, I felt in a way Jeremy Corbyn has finally been able to publish the manifesto that he's always dreamt of doing. Kind of irrespective of what happens in the election, it felt to me as a sort of culmination of a big moment for him, because it's a sort of 2019 version of all of the principles that he's believed in for such a long time.
Well, yeah, and let's look at the pages with all the numbers on them, which is the bit I always turn to first. And it's things like, okay, the new income tax rates. So 45p will be on from £80,000 upwards. That will raise 11 billion a year by 2023. Oh, except people might change their behaviour and it'll be 6 billion less. Corporation tax, an extra 23 billion a year. 14 more billion in other taxes. Financial transaction tax, 8 billion. Tackling tax avoidance, again, 6 billion. Like loads of big numbers. And then you look at the spending. Yeah, and then you look at the spending and it's things like schools, 5.5 billion, abolishing tuition fees at university, 13.6 billion, free personal care for the over 65s, 10.8 billion, and there's loads and loads and loads of other things they want to buy, isn't there?
Shall we listen to Jeremy Corbyn making his big pitch and the kind of central thrust of his argument?
This manifesto is, and I'm proud of it, the most radical and ambitious plan to transform our country for decades. In an election offering a once-in-a-generation chance for real change. We can end privatisation and rescue our National Health Service. We can get Brexit sorted and bring our country together. We can tackle the climate emergency that threatens us all. And we can rewrite the rules of our economy to work for the many, not the few. Ignore the wealthy and the powerful who tell you that's not possible. The future is ours to make together.
So does it basically translate as taking from the rich to give to those less well off, you know, having excellent public services? And if that is the promise. I mean, Laura, you said there's scepticism as to whether, all these wishes can come true. But would it be enough to bring back those anti-establishment voters who used to vote for Labour, who then drifted over to the Brexit Party, for example?
Well, I think first there's a couple of things in there. First off, there's scepticism even from people like the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies. Independent number crunchers have looked at what they say they can raise from higher taxes on business and higher taxes on the wealthy, which is really extensive. And they say basically there's no way they can be sure that they would be able to raise anything like the amount that they want to. So, take it all with a pretty big bucket of salt. Second of all, it's not all about giving things to people who have the hardest time, because throughout this manifesto, and Chris, I don't know if you'd agree, there's a lot of the concept of universality, shall we say. Now, what is that? Election casters, Brexit casters, welcome one and all. It's basically that everybody gets the same free stuff. So the real questions too for people who might be Labour voters, frankly, some Labour candidates, former Labour MPs, who think, hang on a minute, business and people at the top are being asked to subsidise everybody. So it includes, free tuition fees for the kids of millionaires, free dental checks for, people who've got loads and loads of dosh. Because Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, his leadership, believes really strongly in the concept of universality, which is basically, as a society, you pay lots of higher tax, but everybody gets the benefits of it, rather than that more new Labour style of targeting to the really, really neediest.
Yeah, and as well, there's that real desire, that sort of fundamental shift in the role of the state, isn't there, that runs through pretty much every page of this document, with the plans for nationalisations and transforming the role of the state at a national and a local level in terms of its role within the economy and its role within society. One quick question, Laura, before we get onto all things Brexit, because you have to go to page 89 of this manifesto of 100 and odd pages before Brexit features, is how different is it from the manifesto of a couple of years ago? There's been lots of references, hasn't there, to it being more radical than last time. But I just wonder, for the electorate, last time it was the most different Labour manifesto for a generation. This time it's Jeremy Corbyn plus another couple of years. So in terms of how it is perceived, I wonder on the sort of radicalometer where it sits in terms of how it might be taken in by the electorate.
I mean, Chris, you're absolutely right. 2017 was already a really big departure from 2015. And 2015 under Ed Miliband was a really big break with a kind of orthodoxy of New Labour. But I think this is much, much further than they went. Imagine like 2015 to 2017 was sort of, going from London to Bristol. 2017 is like going from kind of London to John O'Groats. I think I really sense this is a very big departure, because you've got so many extra things. Huge council house building programme, 6 major nationalisations. It's really, really significant stuff. And, there are cases that they can't afford not to act. The country has to afford this, because we can't afford not to act, because they believe the problems of the country are so deep. Huge plans in here for dealing with the environment and what, is being described as the climate emergency. But the polls at the moment don't suggest that there are enough people out there who've got the appetite for what's a total reboot of the country. But we'll see.
And then, Chris, as you said, you have to flick to page 89, and then you get 4 pages in a section titled The Final Say on Brexit.
4 out of 105 in total.
And here's what Jeremy Corbyn had to say about the final say on Brexit.
We will secure a sensible deal that protects manufacturing and the Good Friday Agreement, and then put it to a public vote alongside the option of remaining in the EU. So if you want to leave without trashing our economy or selling out our NHS, you'll be able to vote for it. If you want to remain, you'll be able to vote for that. So let's take this out of the hands of politicians and give the British people the final say.
Katja, I wonder, from your perspective, speaking to people in Brussels, as you guys over there are keeping an eye on what's happening over here, how that pitch from Jeremy Corbyn, how what we're hearing from Boris Johnson and the other parties, we'll come on to a couple of them in a bit, how that's going down.
So, I mean, from the European perspective, obviously there's most interest in these 4 pages, and they were looking about freedom of movement in particular. Did we have a clear answer today?
Well, that's a good question, because actually the free movement bit that's raised everyone's eyebrows isn't in the Brexit section. It's in the Home Affairs and Immigration section. And they have an interesting phrase about free movement has been valuable and for socially and economically, and we should continue with the benefits no matter what the Brexit deal is. So sort of, is that free movement minus? But I think the briefing from Labour is pretty much that their new deal they'd negotiate with the EU in their first 3 months in office would probably have a big free movement element, because they want to have really, really deep association with the single market. And as we've learnt, the 4 freedoms go together, and one of the freedoms is freedom of movement. In terms of the other bits of the Labour Brexit bit, it's the stuff that we've become very used to, the idea of a permanent customs union with the UK having a say in what they call joint UK-EU trade deals, close alignment with the single market, and continued participation in EU agencies and things like the European arrest warrant, which I think are easy to say, a bit trickier to do, some of those things.
Isn't it kind of Norway plus? Isn't
really...
it that sort of thing? And the plus being the customs union on top of a kind of Norway relationship. I mean, and that means, let's be clear, being an absolute rule taker for the UK after Brexit, if that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the soft Brexit that Labour's always said that they would seek to negotiate. The thing that's in the manifesto, which I think might be the, how do we say, stretchiest claim, which they've said again and again, is they think they could do it in 3 months and then have a referendum in 6 months' time. And as we know, we talked about last week, didn't we? Like when you talked to Jean-Claude Juncker, Katya, I mean, the idea that that's realistic is... like a lot of things that feature in political parties' manifestos, they don't quite end up working out like that. But you never know. Jean-Claude
Juncker was also the man who said that there would be no further extension for the UK. And of course, there was one. I mean, you know, he would say that it's unrealistic to have renegotiations because, frankly, he doesn't really want any more. He thinks there's another deal on the table, and you know that's the one that should go forward. I think that if there were some kind of Labour government, minority supported from the outside or whatever, and they wanted to renegotiate to have a softer Brexit, at the end of the day, they'd mutter, they'd grumble, and they'd groan, but they would reopen the withdrawal agreement and they would reopen negotiations.
Well, this is all stuff, as you said, we've been discussing on our cousin podcast, second cousin podcast, Daily Election Cast, which you can get, of course, from BBC Sounds, like all the best podcasts. It's the same feed as us, so you've been getting it whether you want it or not. And of course, we'll look at the Conservative Party manifesto and many others when they all come out. So still waiting for the Conservative Party manifesto. The first manifesto that got published this week, though, was the Green Party of England and Wales, which they published to the world at a lovely wetland centre in West London. Yep. And this is what the deputy leader of the Green Party of England and Wales, Amelia Womack, said.
Greens are different. We will give you a people's vote, your final say to stop Brexit. We want to stand up for freedom of movement. We've been Remain since the start, and we will be Remain until we win.
A couple of points, looking at my PDF rather than my printed copy of the Green Manifesto. One little nugget, by the way, which is that spot, the Wetland Centre in Barnes, I think it is, isn't it, in southwest London, happens to be a spot where the Greens aren't actually standing. So in the very place where they decided to launch, because it was nice greenery in terms of the backdrop, it's one of those places where they've done a deal with the Lib Dems, and the Greens aren't standing. A couple of other things just rattling through that. I mean, the biggest thing, I suppose the interesting thing with the Greens is that in elections gone by, they talked a lot about the environment and the other parties talked a little about the environment. This time, if we briefly park Brexit, the green theme runs through all of the big parties' manifestos, doesn't it? They all agree it's massive. They disagree about the time frame for going carbon neutral or the methods to do it and all that kind of stuff, but the essence of the challenge facing the country and the world, they all seem to accept now.
Laura mentioned the Liberal Democrats, so let's talk about them now. They launched their manifesto on Wednesday in a nightclub in North London in the presence of you and Laura, who I noticed you stayed for a little drink afterwards.
I've never been somewhere so trendy. It was.
Did you boogie, though?
I felt like I was boogieing the whole time.
And of course, the big thing for the Lib Dems, of course, is they keep talking about this so-called Remain bonus, which they say would be the boost to the economy of the UK if the UK reversed Brexit and stayed in the EU. And everyone...
It's all about relative rates of economic growth, isn't it? The projections that suggest that the economy would grow by a greater percentage per year than any of the Leave options. Anyway, shall we hear from Jo Swinson, the Lib Dem leader?
If we leave the European Union,
We are looking at years and years and years of endless trade negotiations. More time and energy wasted on getting something that will never be as good as what we already have. More time and energy wasted fulfilling the ideological fantasies of Nigel Farage so that Boris Johnson can play at being Prime Minister. More time and energy wasted that we could spend on improving everyone's lives. The solution is clear. If you want to put an end to this, if you want to stop Boris Johnson and his cabal of hardline Brexiteers, then you need to vote for the Liberal Democrats. We are the only party that can win a significant number of seats from the Conservatives and deprive them a majority.
A couple of other things jumping out of the Lib Dem manifesto. Stop Brexit, build a brighter future, the headline on the front page. Similar length to the Labour manifesto and the same size, A5 as well. The striking thing though, Laura, that point that Jo Swinson was making at the end there, so different tonally from where she was about a fortnight ago, where there was all that stuff, even if it wasn't necessarily hugely widely believed, that she was a candidate for Prime Minister, and now it's about preventing Boris Johnson getting a majority.
Yes, Brexitcasters, this week we have witnessed the first big pivot of the election campaign of 2019. Things have changed in the polls for the Lib Dems for various different reasons, and they have changed what they're kind of stating as their public ambition. So now they're going all out to take seats from the Tories in areas where small c Conservatives or people who might tend Lib Dems who are really cross about Brexit. But it's also interesting, it's really clear to me now behind the scenes that if there is a hung parliament, she'd work with either party if they were to offer her that second referendum she so desires.
So I'll drop in a couple of other little policy nuggets from the Lib Dem manifesto. They talk about
childcare, big expansion in childcare.
Yeah, and that's expensive.
That's a big nugget.
Yeah, they talk
big
about
nugget.
Freezing rail fares for commuters and season ticket holders for the duration of a parliament. They talk about 80% of electricity being generated by renewable sources by 2030, which Chris Morris from Reality Check was telling us on Election Cast is very ambitious given where the numbers are at the moment.
Lots more on air passenger duty as well. So if you get more than 2 return flights a year, you'll be paying a lot more in tax.
Return international flights,
International
which somebody
flights.
pointed out was an interesting thing a line to draw, given that they have, well, at least have had in the previous parliaments, the MP who represents Orkney and Shetland.
Of course.
Anyway.
Now, Katja, I got a text this week from somebody on the new UK task force, which has replaced the Brexit task force in the Commission, saying, I haven't noticed a lot of people talking about the future relationship between the UK and the EU in the election campaign. What sort of stuff are they talking about over there?
Well, I think that, there would be nodding heads across the EU when we heard Jo Swinson just there talking about trade talks going on for years and years and years. Nobody here believes Boris Johnson when he says confidently, I can get this trade deal done by December 2020. And yes, we've heard Michel Barnier and we've heard the incoming Trade Commissioner, Phil Hogan, say, look, this should be able to be done quickly because, of course, the UK is currently a member of the EU. So, all we need to do is take away some regulations if you want to have an arm's length free trade agreement. But what the EU is going to do is play tough, and they will say, look, we'll give you a very quick free trade agreement, Mr. Johnson, if he does become the next Prime Minister. You're under time pressure. We'll be hearing the clock is ticking from Michel Barnier back once again, and because they know that Boris Johnson will be under real political pressure back home. So you can have your quick and easy FTA, but you have to sign up to all this EU regulation, all this level playing field regulation, because the EU wants to reassure other member states that they're not going to have a real advantage competitively in the UK over the rest of the EU with this FTA. Now, the EU knows full well that this will be toxic politically for the Prime Minister to sign away sovereignty like that. And that is just one of many, many reasons. I wrote a Twitter thread of 21 points. I know that goes against Twitter laws today, as to why that's one of many, many reasons. I know, you don't let me talk very much on Brexitcast these days because of the elections. I have to get it all out on Twitter.
Was that one of your briefer social media contributions?
Yeah, absolutely. I held myself back. But the EU is convinced this is not going to end after this election, whether Labour has some kind of government and works towards renegotiations and then a second referendum, Or if the Tories are able to have their own government, you will then have a tussle over negotiations, which will probably lead to a cliff edge again, leading up to December next year, of a no-deal Brexit once again, or at least no trade deal. And so, of course, that just means that uncertainty will continue. That is the thinking here.
Just really quickly on that, though, that's why, actually, for the Tories, that's why they're having this election, and that's why they're trying, above all else, to get a majority. Because if they have a majority, even a half-decent one, even a majority of one, then they can do things. And then if they had to extend, well, it'd be a bit of rough and tumble and people would be cross, but they could extend if they really had to. And then we get into a different kind of debate. So even though trade negotiations might be brutal and bloody and there'd be lots of big, vigorous political debate, there will be, if we've actually left, a different landscape. Because the biggest question mark, stay or go, would have been answered.
Laura, it's time for the big moment of the week, which is Laura's car park update.
Oh, what's that?
Will you show us your car park?
You should have a jingle for that, shouldn't you? Or a car park.
Honk, honk.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think, my lovely colleague, Paul Twin, the superstar producer, took some pictures, humiliatingly, actually, of just how cold and lonely it is here. And we've got a picture of all of you, though, behind me, which is rather nice, keeping me company. And actually, my lovely, amazing team who are with me, Paul Twin and Ron Brown, and all sorts of other lovely people. And it's been very nice at Birmingham City University. Everyone's been very friendly.
Okay.
And they even let us use the loo, because there aren't many loos in car parks. It's all glamour.
Well, we know it's a little cold out there on the campaign trail. So Adam has been putting his time to good use this afternoon.
So there you go. We've got you some presents, actually, you two.
Yes.
Because on Friday, tomorrow, or maybe it's already tomorrow if you're listening to us later, is Six Music's T-shirt day, where you have to go to work wearing your favourite band's T-shirt. And so we've got you
in December
some ABBA T-shirts.
We were thinking, you could in November you can kind of channel this in the way that occasionally political campaigners do, where they'll wear their T-shirt with a political slogan on, but then wear it over a shirt.
Boys?
Or a
Yeah, well,
coat.
hang on. So Chris has got Anna Frid for you, Katja,
nice.
brunette, and I've got Agneta for you, Laura, blonde.
And now this is the moment where you've just had you two.
And now we're taking our shirts off.
Oh.
No.
Bjorn and Benny.
I feel we should have.
This is meant to be a family show.
No.
No, we haven't.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
we've
goodness.
got the T-shirts on.
I think it might be better to be a podcast.
Right,
let's.
The problem is, though, I actually didn't buy these T-shirts, so they've got a bit, as producer Dino said, a bit of a dad fit. Right now.
What does that mean, loose?
Yeah, not very well fitted.
Now I have to go to the station.
Right, well, you can't go before we do the quiz. We've got a quiz.
Soon.
We've got a quiz, and it's about ABBA.
A quiz?
And manifestos.
No.
So
Thank God it's not about the withdrawal agreement.
No, so I know everyone's getting a bit bored of my quizzes, but I just have to do one because I do love ABBA. So what I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you a fact or a number, and then you have to work out whether it's an ABBA fact or from a manifesto that was published this week. All will become clear.
I mean, you've given this quite a lot of thought.
So here's this quiz is called "The Winner Takes It All."
Oh,
obviously.
Yeah.
But it's just for fun.
Am I allowed to sing at all?
You can if you want. Right. The first number is 1.2 billion. Is that the combined net worth in dollars of the four members of ABBA, or the amount the Lib Dems estimate would be raised in tax from legalising cannabis? 1.2 billion.
Oh, I think that's the Lib Dems and cannabis.
Is it cannabis?
No,
I think so too.
It's ABBA. The Lib Dems say the Lib Dems would actually raise 1.49 billion in tax from legalising cannabis. 1.49 billion.
Underestimated the marijuana tax take.
So
you see, always write the songs. Don't just be in a band. Write the songs.
Yeah, although cannabis is worth more than ABBA apparently. Right, 700 million.
Not that we would approve.
700 million. Is that the number of trees that the Green Party of England and Wales want to plant? Or is it the number of records ABBA have sold in total?
That's the Greens. I'm going for the Greens. I'm saying that with a reasonable amount of conviction, having been looking at the PDF a minute ago.
Correct.
Oh, yes.
It is the Green Party of England and Wales. ABBA have sold between 100 and 150 million albums. Right, Laura, this one can be for you.
Sorry.
The number for you, Laura, is 48. Is that the number of weeks that ABBA's album Voulez-Vous was in the UK charts, or the number of weeks of free childcare per year being offered by the Lib Dems?
Oh, Adam, you are good.
48.
48 weeks is a funny number. Okay, I think this is a trick question. I think
you've
it's
missed a train for
both.
this, Laura.
Let's see. It's the Lib Dems. 48 weeks of free childcare. That's why it's so expensive. If you're interested, Voulez-Vous is in the charts for 43 weeks.
Thanks for that.
Right, 2 more.
Oh, you see, you could have given me that.
This one is for you, Katja.
Okay.
The number is 5%. Is that the pay rise public sector workers would receive in the first year of a Labour government, or the number of people who said in a survey that ABBA was the band they most wanted to reform? 5%. Is it public sector pay or ABBA?
Public sector pay. Let's go radical.
Correct. That's what Labour has proposed.
Also, it'd be a lot higher than
25%.
Yeah,
Well done.
25% of people said they wanted ABBA
Yes,
to reform.
it's much too low.
Exactly.
5%. I mean, what about you and me, Adam, voting at least 50 times ourselves?
Exactly. Click, 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 click.
So, yeah.
Right, Laura, you get the last one because you've got to get your train. The number is 21.
Yes.
Is that the number of times the word Waterloo appears in the song of the same name, or the number of times the word Brexit appears in the Labour manifesto? 21.
I'm going to say... I'm not singing it.
Go on, which
I could
station are you
work it out
going
by singing
to?
the song
Is
from
it
start to finish,
Waterloo?
but I've got to go for my train. No. I'm going to say Brexit in the Labour manifesto.
It's both. 21 times. Well done, everyone.
See, and then I thought I had that clever approach. Can I say I've got one my favourite moment of today on a very, very serious, important political day, apart from doing Brexitcast, obviously, there was that one of the things, politicians are all human beings as well. This is true, I promise you. And a lot of Jeremy Corbyn's family were here today, including his sons. And I had a chat with his son, Ben, who is a football coach. And he said, his dad looked like a genuine prime minister. He was very excited, but a bit nervous. And I said, do you think he's going to move into number 10? And he said, I hope so, because I've promised my son we're going to play FIFA there. I just thought it was the most human thing I've heard about anyone's political ambitions for a long time. So if Jeremy Corbyn wins the election, then Ben Corbyn and his grandson, so Jeremy Corbyn's grandson, has got his eye on playing video games in the Downing Street flat. There you go.
For balance, we now have to find out the favourite computer games of all other party leaders. Maybe we'll find out on Question Time on the leaders' specials.
If Jeremy Corbyn does make it to number 10, then on a human level, Boris Johnson would find it easier to order his Thai curry.
True, because he revealed it was very difficult.
Isn't it true, according to this?
Yes, that's true. We should do our traditional thing, shouldn't we, of a brief look ahead? And basically, it's more manifestos. So we'll have the Conservatives coming up in the next few days. We've got the Scottish National Party to keep an eye on.
Brexit Party say they're going to publish a contract with the people of Britain.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye out for that. They're kind of making a virtue out of it not being a full manifesto.
And on this side, on Friday, we find out what the European Commission want to do next about not being given a UK commissioner name.
And on Friday, also, it's the Question Time Leaders Specials with Fiona Bruce in Sheffield.
Yeah.
Nicola Sturgeon, Joe Swinson, Jeremy Corbyn, Boris Johnson, and the public asking the questions.
And Telly have realised that Friday night is the place to be for political debate and have decided to schedule their special up against any questions, which is outrageous.
Oh, well, I'll put my headphones in. Right, bye, you guys. See you soon.
See you later.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Brexitcast.
Brexitcast
From the BBC.